How are things going for you, Pam?
They're going okay. Quiet.
Must be nice.
Just digging up some lilacs. You need some?
Sounds lovely.
Right, that's nice.
I'll probably kill them.
No. Just have to water them for 10 days and then let them go.
Sounds great. Hi, Erin. Hey, Jen.
Hello.
Are you muted, Heather?
Heather,
Yes.
you having
I
problems?
was wondering, the lilacs, do you like dig them up and replant them is what you do?
No, they set up suckers much like a tomato plant would. So they're along a, not a tap root, but a root that comes pretty close to the ground. And when it comes up, it's just, it could be small or it could be 3 foot tall with leaves on it. So if I don't get rid of them, then it pulls away the juice to the main plant.
Yeah.
So you really want to either cut them out or I just send them on their way to whoever wants them. So I've got people all up and down the street have them at this point.
Neighbor of the year, Pamela Adrian.
Well, I've got 23 varieties, so it's
Wow.
a lot. They're all different colors. And they're amazing. You ought to walk by in May the 5th or 6th, right around there.
Oh,
Gorgeous. But that's all that's filling my yard. I just have a path of green grass. That's about it.
Julie, do we expect Nick?
I don't think I saw an email from him. Let me just check.
Yeah. Hello.
Good evening, Patricia.
I did not get an email from him, so I would say go ahead and get started
All right.
when you're ready.
So we'll call this meeting of CPDC to order.
Sounds good.
Julie, if you can sort of go through the ground rules here on Zoom with these meetings.
Sure. So hi, welcome everybody. Nice to see you again. I'm Julie Mercier, Community Development Director, for anyone here who doesn't know me. This meeting will be conducted over Zoom. The information about the meeting is located on the Cpdc website, on the Cpdc web page of the town website. You can, if you're watching from home right now and you want to join us, you can click on the link. The meeting is also being recorded by RCTV. So this meeting over Zoom, there's a few protocols that we typically follow. The first is if you can please mute yourselves when you're not speaking, that would be great. And then typically what happens is that the commission will review the proposals and the applications that are on the agenda, and then they'll discuss them. And then after they have their discussion and their questions answered, they'll open it up for public comment. So if you would like to say something and you're a member of the public, you can let me know that and let the chair know that by using the raise hand feature in Zoom. Or since I can see everyone on the screen right now, you can also just raise your hand and I'll make a note and I'll let John know. And then when he acknowledges you, if you can please state your name and address for the record, then you can speak at that time. So tonight from the CPDC, we have John Weston, the chair. We have Heather Klisch, Pam Adrian, Rachel Hish, and then from staff we have Andrew McNichol, staff planner, and Erin Schaefer, economic development director, and myself. So that's all from me. Thanks, John.
Great, thank you. So tonight's agenda is shorter than most, right? We really have only 2 things on the agenda. The first is to go over a proposed zoning change or discuss issues associated with that. And then the second item is to go over meeting minutes from past meetings. Erin, great to have you here. I'm glad that you've joined us, and hopefully you can provide some insight into things that you're hearing from businesses in town. So I guess I just want to start off by at least going over where sort of the purpose of why we're looking at this, and what we covered last meeting. And I actually, as going through the meeting minutes, I had a couple of questions, and that may lead into the proposal that the proposed language that Julie and Andrew pulled together. So the reason why we want to talk about this, the issue, right, that we're trying to resolve is that currently town doesn't have a way to approve a temporary use that doesn't seem to be overly onerous. So, right, this came about, right, with COVID-19 coming upon us, and some store owners and restaurant owners wanting to do something quickly to address no one wanting to go inside their businesses, or not even being allowed to go inside their businesses, and it highlighted the fact that we as town in our zoning bylaw don't have a way to address changes that that business owners may want to make quickly or temporarily. And I think temporarily is the key word here. But as we dug into this, it seemed that well, we're not necessarily going to address how to allow people to do things temporarily inside. That would be a temporary use, right? An additional temporary use, and we're not going to address that. What we are going to address is how we can allow for uses outdoors that may not have been originally thought of when they first applied for their site plan. And as we thought about it, right, that may be a temporary use, or that may be temporary in nature, meaning, seasonal, or even less than that. But not wanting to make it so onerous that it wouldn't make sense for anyone to do it, to go through the process, but still make sure that we have protections in place to ensure safety, to mitigate any impacts from neighbors, and to generally comply with what we would approve in a regular site plan review. So does that all make, we all on the same page? Erin, yeah, all right. Right, there's a couple of ways that we thought about doing that. One was, well, the ones, I'm sure that Julie thought of more than a couple ways, but the ones that seem to be the best ways forward were to either a special permit or a minor site plan review, and there may have been some other ways that we could have accommodated some of these changes, but it seemed to be not quite in keeping with the spirit of those other areas of the zoning bylaw. So, and that's really where I come to my question, Julie. Looking back at what we talked about last week, hold on, I had those minutes right here, or at least I thought I did. You had said,
You want to just talk for a minute?
sure.
Timing.
Oh.
All right, thank you. So you had a question for me, John, sorry.
I did. You had said that minor site plan review process are non-discretionary, and that a special permit is still required for the use, which is discretionary, but required a lengthier process for applications. So can you just, before we get into some of the things that you had proposed, can you talk about what that process is for a special permit and what the process is for a minor site plan review, and why, sort of the length of the process and what's required and that sort of thing?
Right, yeah, so that's a really good place to start, I think, John. So basically, just for everyone's edification and reminder to anyone who's watching, or just for anyone who's not familiar with how we do things. So special permits are statutory, and they come with notification requirements. They come with legal ad requirements. We have a calendar that we build that basically works backwards from when the Cpdc meeting date is to when the legal ads need to print to comply with the statute to when we need all the documentation by, so staff have a chance to review it. It requires an abutters list and 2-week notification and all of that stuff, and then a public hearing, and then the Cpdc has however many meetings it needs to deliberate on the public hearing and make a decision, and then after the decision is issued, there's a 20-day appeal period. So all told, we generally say that the special permit process is probably no less than 90 days. It could be a little bit less than that, if everything works out perfectly, but it's really kind of a 3-month process. Site plans and minor site plans are non-statutory, meaning that there's no legal requirements for staff to do anything related to them. So we kind of make it up at the local level. And what we typically do in Reading is we actually treat them very similarly to special permits. But with full site plans, we do the whole everything, just like it's a special permit, and we even call it a public hearing, even though we don't technically have to. With minor site plan, we have a more compressed time frame typically, where we'll accept them in a couple weeks in advance, and we'll give some sort of notification to abutters, whether it's depending on when we get it. So if it's we like to have things as soon as someone knows they want to do something, and then follow the process, the full process for everything. But we do have the flexibility to do a 7-day notification if we want to. No notification, which is not something we would ever do, but we could do no notification if we wanted to. And so it just gives us more flexibility. So I would say, just framing this up a little bit, that's, kind of the special permit versus site plan review conversation. Oh, and then actually getting to another thing that you said, John, special permits are discretionary, right? So they're at your discretion whether to grant them or not. Site plan review is not discretionary. So, you can approve it. You can approve it with conditions. You don't have as much leeway if it's a by right kind of situation. So the conditions are really critical to the special permit process, I think, and just understanding what the parameters you want to set on something are. To the site plan process. So I would say, framing it up again, we kind of have, with outdoor commerce, dining, and recreation, kind of have 2 big categories that we're looking at. We have the public, which is the public roads, public parking lots, public sidewalks, and that is not what you guys are here to talk about. That is not your jurisdiction. That's the jurisdiction of the select board. But you have the jurisdiction over private land, and so any of those lands that are zoned business, industrial, overlay district, the areas where we have, you know, strip malls or, you know, mixed use buildings, things like that. So that's the land we're talking about. The parking lots or open spaces that are associated with those buildings. So that's the outdoor space we're talking about. I would say that, you know, when we look at, like last time we kind of went through this exercise of like, what do we have in the bylaw that we can work with? What did the administrative rule from 2011 like give us the power to do? How can we kind of do a lot of like gymnastics to make that fit what we might want to do now? And I think that, you know, you guys came to the smart conclusion that really probably the best, easiest, cleanest path forward is to do a zoning bylaw amendment at town meeting, given that we're not under the, you know, exact same time constraint we were under before when the pandemic was just sprung upon us and we were just reacting. Now we can actually be more proactive and like think about what we want to allow, what kind of parameters we want to set, and what kind of process we want with a little bit more breathing room. So the other thing that's nice about that is that when we talked last time, we talked about minor site plan review, we talked about accessory uses. And I went back and looked at the bylaw, and, you know, the modifications that would, or the amendments that would need to be made seemed actually fairly straightforward. I do have like a few questions which I posed in the document that you reviewed, you know, things to think about. But it's something that I think could easily fit into minor site plan review. And you've actually recently, in my time in Reading, approved a minor site plan for outdoor dining at a property in town. So it's something that has been done before that we could make more clear, and I think fairly simply include in the bylaw. So when you are ready for me to delve in, let me know.
Thanks. Before we sort of go, I think, into the details, any board members, questions, comments?
Yes. In regard to the plot plan, I'd like to see something that describes what is in the area, how it is affixed or held down. We had the tents last time. Were they bolted in? Did they go in through the cement or through asbestos, or sorry, not asbestos, asphalt? And anything that's going to be part of that site, not just a structure, but we're talking about a structure as well. So there needs to be something that talks about, included in the plot plan, are anything that's going to be within the structure, how it's affixed or held down or secured, and so on. Because you want to make sure that if somebody's going to put some sort of a storage bin, large one even, that it's not going to be picked up by the wind or taken away through theft. So those are the kinds of things I'd like to see included.
Okay, yeah, so we can definitely get into like specifics like that. I would like to kind of start from the top.
Okay.
If John, if you think it makes sense.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And it's what I did is I incorporated Tony's feedback that he sent me via email into the document. So it's going to look slightly different than the document I sent you last week. And then I incorporated some of my responses to Tony as well. So let's see. Let me just get you guys all back in my view. One second. So you guys can all see my screen with the Word doc. All right. So what I'll do is just like take it from the top. I did what I typically do when we're talking about a zoning bylaw amendment. I pull out all the areas of the zoning bylaw that I think we need to amend. So starting with the definitions, as we noted last time we talked, we have a definition for open storage that kind of gets at what we want it to get at with this, but it's just, I think it's a poor term. The term and the definition don't really match, right? So instead of referring to it as open storage, I would call it something like outdoor commerce, dining, or recreation. and I defined it here, you know, one question that this brings up, which we can talk about, is whether we want to keep the definition of open storage, better define that definition, and then create a separate definition for outdoor commerce, dining, and recreation. We can talk about that as we go through. Tony feels that we should keep it and have two separate things, and I have a few questions related to that. I am inclined to agree with that, though. And then scrolling down in section 4 is where we have site plan review. And I pulled out the section that's applicability and talks about minor site plan. So the triggers that we have on the books right now for minor site plan, and I added one at the end, outdoor commerce, dining, or recreation. That would, you know, claw right back to that definition at the top. Right. And then going down through minor site plan review, Tony had a couple comments. He felt that we would want to add some specific parameters for an application specifically for outdoor commerce, dining, and recreation. And we can talk about that. We do have some procedures that are already listed that would apply to any application. And I thought they were more or less kind of getting at what we would need to know. They're not super duper specific, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. And I added just at the top that we want a complete application. So that seems like a good thing to have. And then also authorization from the property owner will be very important for something like this if it's a building with multiple tenants in it, especially. And then just for down here for the notification, this is the text here that's already here, you know, explains how we notify. And then I added that we wouldn't just notify abutters because that's not good enough. That's property owners. And we would also need to notify other business or tenants located on the site. And maybe even we would say on and within a certain radius of the site as well. So that'll be important. And we do have a large business database that we can use to do that notification. And let's see, you know what, I'm just going to expand the comment here. I know this doesn't include everything Tony said. So another thing that Tony had opined on with this was specifying a time limitation. So saying that we could issue a minor site plan review for a year and then requiring that a business come back and apply if it's successful for them and they want to continue it every year, they could apply to come back, apply for a major modification to their site plan. And then again, he thought we should specify some criteria that kind of limit the size and the scope so that it's not just like any use of outside space can qualify as minor, but within limits. So I think he has really good ideas there. I guess I would just counter a little bit with, for the first comment about specifying it for a time, like I think it's important that a business be able to continue doing something that's successful. And we do, you know, I'd rather have us have someone come back if there's a problem. And we do have a trigger right here under C, letter C, that's an existing site that becomes a nuisance that's creating a problem can come back to you guys. So that would be one way we could manage that. Another way we could manage it is to have a condition in every minor site plan review permit that says that they need to come back to you if the permit is not complied with. So that way a business that gets a permit successfully operates and follows all the rules and all the guidelines and the parameters of the permit doesn't necessarily have to come back and reapply the following year. So that's just food for thought. And then the reason that I didn't specify like super specific criteria for how to limit or how to determine what's minor versus major with regards to this is that I think that would be a hard thing to do on a one size fits all basis. I think that we would, like we always do with every application, we would work with applicants before they come to you and we would let them know what we think the sticking points might be, what the problems might be. where you might push back a little bit. You know, we would, depending on whatever the time frame is that we establish for when we want the application and when the hearing is, like we would try to do a staff review in between and get all the feedback we can get. And then, you know, I think that you could put reasonable limitations on whatever the scope is during, that would come out during the hearing process. So I'm erring more on the side of like leaving the bylaw a little bit vague in that regard, so as not to limit businesses and create unintended consequences because we think we know better than they do or something like that. So it's probably not the best way to put it, but that's what I'm getting at. And then just going down in minor site plan review, one nice thing that I encountered is that we actually already allow you to waive certain parking and loading requirements. So that's really helpful to this effort in the sense that if someone wants to use some parking spaces for an outdoor yoga class or something like that, we can waive those parking requirements to allow that. And it's already built into the language. It's not something we have to add. We may want to modify it so that it's including all the business, industrial, and overlay districts that we're talking about. But we can talk about that. And then, so then I went into section 5, which is where the use table is, because we would need to modify it here. So again, like I crossed out open storage and I just put the new definition, but we can talk about whether we want to keep open storage and redefine it and just establish a new use. And then I put in MSPR, minor site plan review. So it's clear that in any of these instances, they need to come in for a minor site plan review. And then here is the list of like special criteria that we have on the books right now for an open storage special permit. And I think that, you know, this is really something different. It's not well defined currently. So if we do decide to define it better and keep these criteria, the question I would ask is like, is this useful? I haven't seen one of these in my almost 5 years with the town. I don't know if there was a time when you guys did a lot of open storage special permits. If it would be a big deal if we could take it and kind of incorporate it into that outdoor dining, like it's say outdoor storage, commerce dining, and just lump it in and have someone come in for a minor site plan review for that. We could leave it alone. However you want to do it is fine. I'm not aware of what purpose it's really serving in our bylaw right now. So I think that's everything. Let me just, yeah. So I welcome your thoughts.
So I have a quick question. I think, wasn't the initial discussion about this being temporary? No matter, even if it went through the site plan review, there was an aspect of this that was not a permanent installation. I mean, maybe I'm just missing the end of the thread of the conversation, but this feels like somebody could, you know, set up a tent in a parking spot forever if they wanted to.
Yeah, so I think that that's where, like, when you look at this definition where I say, I mean, I know it's a little hard to read with the track changes on it, but we talk about it being subject to limitations imposed by you guys as part of the plan review process. So that's where you would put those parameters. You would say you would say they could do it from April to October, and they could be open certain hours of the day, and that's where you would put those controls in. It would be, and it would all be discussed and negotiated with each applicant as part of the process, depending on what makes sense for their specific needs. The temporary, last time we talked about this, the administrative rule from 2011 allowed staff to issue a temporary special permit. You know, I think there is, I see that there is like sort of an immediate need for things like this right now that might feel temporary because of like, we're hoping COVID's going to be temporary. But I also think that there's a long-term kind of bigger picture need for a little bit more flexibility for businesses to be able to use outdoor spaces and to help with the vibrancy of the town in general. So I think that we could work within the minor site plan review process to put the limits and to give it that temporary, it could be temporary, but it could be annual. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so I'm just thinking about the, you know, sometimes when we go back to these, we don't remember, you know, what the inspiration for the language was in the first place. So I'm thinking about this from someone 5 years from now, you know, the comment of subject to limitations imposed, and or the fact that we are thinking about the annual review or the temporary nature of this as something part of those conditions, but that's not explicitly in this write-up right now, even just for posterity's sake. I don't know how it would fit in, but I do think that without putting it down, it's going to be lost to the sands of time.
I wouldn't mind if this year were lost to the sands of time. Maybe that's just me.
That's a good point, and it could be right. What I'm hearing is that the limitations that could be imposed by CPDC could include whether or not it's understood to be permanent or seasonally temporary or temporary for a year, come back and see how we're doing. We could do all of that, or it could be opening the door to kind of a new way in some places, and opening to, hey, this is maybe something that you can continue seasonally indefinitely. So I guess to Rachel's point, is it done, or do we say something like subject to limitations imposed by CPDC, including but not limited to the seasonality or permanence or temporariness? That's not the right word, but the word that means that.
I guess, and I do get what you're saying, and think that we should include that. I don't think the definition is the right place to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I do think that maybe if we can later on down include, you know, sort of the types of limitations that CPDC may consider would include, you know, the seasonality, you know, periods of time, length of allowed use, whatever. But I think we include that elsewhere and just not in the definition, because we try not to do that. Right.
Yeah. I have another thought that actually is about the definition up front. I think somebody in the comments asked if recreation was the right word to mean fitness, exercise, and fun. And I'm unsettled about it. I'm wondering if something like programming is broader, or I come from a kind of an outdoor recreation mindset, so I tend to trip up and get in there. Or to everyone else, does recreation mean drive-in movies and art stuff and more than just fitness and trail?
See, I would see fitness more as a business and recreation more as, you know, a pop-up art stand or weekend gathering or something like that. I think you can have it associated with a business, but I feel like fitness in and of itself is its own category.
I like that term you used, programming, outdoor programming.
Yeah.
We probably want to be really clear like what we mean by that, because
yeah,
it does seem kind of like a catch-all term. I mean, another thing too is like this is in the accessory. I guess I didn't make that clear, maybe, but it's in the accessory use table, right? So it has to be, you know, directly linked to whatever the use is that's approved for inside. So maybe therein lies the limits to what programming can mean.
Right, and because I was as you were talking, or as I think Rachel was saying, you know, if it is extending, you know, some art or, you know, some other use that's not necessarily fitness, and it's not commerce, right? And it's not dining, but it's it's a use that could go outside. I don't think that there should be an inherent limitation on that. There may be limitations for other reasons because there's too many externalities, but just because it's you know, an art gallery, and they want to use the outdoor space, then right, we don't want to define that out of existence.
Right. So, I mean, maybe programming.
Yeah, I actually was thinking of something that might be broader and more encompassing. I wasn't at the outset even thinking about art, which was, and I'm testing myself to see if that fits as well. But I was thinking about, you know, a lot of the uses that seem to be described are things where people are leading activities and groups of people outside, and that's where I was thinking of programming. You could say programming or recreation if that definition doesn't get too long. But that was just my thought. I thought recreation might be a little bit too limiting. In again, for posterity, in terms of what people mean. It's not, recreation isn't otherwise defined in our bylaws.
Right. One thing that Andrew and I talked about is like whether and how this should include some kind of special event kind of situation, or if that's like taking this like a step too far, or if we should have a different process for that.
I guess my concern in having a different process for that is that if it's a special event, it still has the same impacts on the neighbors in the community and the safety that it, you know, if it happens for one day or if it happens for, you know, 100 days, it could be just as big of a concern. And so I don't, you know, sure, if someone were to come and review, you know, submit an application, we might review it differently if we knew it was only going to be for 2 days, than we would if it was, you know, all summer long forever. But I think it's the same. I think we need to bake in the same process to those two things, because it's as much about the neighbors and the safety than it is, you know, about anything else, to me.
So should we try to have that included in here somehow? Like what we were thinking is, like, what if, like, I'm just gonna say Eastern Bank because they have a big lot right in the middle of downtown.
Mm-hmm.
What if they wanted to have some sort of like promotional event for like small business loans or something, but then it was a bigger kind of thing where other businesses put up tents and, you know, kind of glommed onto it. And, you know, those things aren't necessarily happening inside the Eastern Bank building on that same property, but like, do we want to care about that kind of thing, I guess would be the question.
I mean, isn't that more of a temporary event permit though? I mean, if they want to have a continuous, you know, mortgage lending info booth in their parking lot, that seems like one thing, but a small business event seems like a temporary event permit. That's different, correct?
Right, we just don't have really a great process for that right now.
because it's on their property.
Right. And so that's the question is like, if they did it and they all got together and just did it and it was fine, like, would we care? Or do we want, I mean, we don't want to over regulate. Like if something's a problem and we don't need to worry about it, or something's not a problem, you know.
I mean, at this point in time, given the mood of this community over the past year, we cannot anticipate what's going to be a problem, what's not.
No, not at all.
You know, I'm thinking this through, and in my mind, it actually relates to this question about whether or not we continue with your outdoor storage definition, where I know that our outdoor storage definition has to do with retail, but it seems to me that the outdoor storage definition and the language around this has to do with the overnight and at least seasonally long-term storage of, say, tents, tables, other stuff you've got out there. I mean, so I haven't kind of figured out what the solution to this. So if Eastern Bank were to have, you know, a mortgage lending pair with other banks on their parking lot one day or over a weekend, I personally think I wouldn't want to care about that. If they were going to, you know, move all of their desks and offices outside for all summer long in a way that, you know, the neighbors, that might impact the neighbors, that's the difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, but just play it out.
Yeah.
So they have some event for a weekend and it's very popular, and all the parking spots over the whole course of the area are completely taken up. And, you know, that wasn't fair to the other businesses who didn't know that that was going to happen, and they couldn't anticipate that their people didn't have anywhere to park. So, you know, anything can happen at this moment in time where, you know, things that seem logically innocuous may or may not be.
Yeah.
Well, at this line of discussion, who has the right to do anything for the fall street fair?
But that's a temporary event permit.
Is it?
It's a civic function permit.
It's on the street.
No, but it's not only on the street. It's on a lot of private properties.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not calling into question that, but right, I mean, there is some line that you draw that you don't right, sort of bother enforcing. Some fall street fair, people doing stuffing in their parking lots is one of those cases.
Yeah.
It's a good point, John. You guys want to move on to
Yeah.
Answered the question.
what was the question again?
I think it's about is this an event related situation, or is this more of, you know, are we going to ask somebody who's extending their use for a really short amount of time to go through this process, yes or no? I think it started with the concept of how do we define all these different uses as extensions of the original business.
Right, like I didn't write this thinking of events. Like I also feel like events typically have, you know, I think they're known about in you know, people's minds for a long time, but they're not necessarily ripe for review until pretty far along. So it's hard to know if a, you know, 1 month process would kill an event, you know, which isn't necessarily what you want. This, I was thinking more of like a long-term strategy for a business.
Yep. I agree.
Erin, any thoughts? You don't want to weigh in?
It's actually really helpful to sit in and listen to all the details. And I think Julie's done a really excellent job. And, you know, really good discussion. I don't want to weigh in one way or another on events or not on particular properties, but, you know, any way to expedite a permitting process and streamline process is obviously favorable to businesses. And it seems like you've been talking about that. So that's great.
Yeah, I guess one thing that if you can chime in if you hear anything, you know, right, you talk to businesses more than we do on a regular basis, and you know, we don't necessarily have our ear to the ground on like what businesses might be trying to do or thinking about that don't even sort of get off the ground because of you know, the hassle of it. And so hopefully, you know, none of this gets, you know, to that, that you haven't heard anything that you're like, oh, people would never do that, or that's going to be a problem, or that sort of thing. So
I'm not seeing any red flags, and
right.
I do think it's important, even you know, through staff level review, we do very rigorous review. And I think that's an important component of what we do, even if things are delegated to staff or through the commission. We really do a strong level of review at the local level, at the staff level too. No red flags for me.
All right, thank you. Julie, if we can go down to the outdoor storage definition as it stands, or that section, because I think that colors a lot of other things.
The criteria or the definition?
The criteria.
Okay.
Or maybe, I guess what I was thinking is that if we start here, we can sort of figure out whether we want to keep it or we don't, or you know, try and merge it together.
Right. So there's only one property in town I can think of that might have a special permit like this, but they might have also used a different process as well. So I'm not sure. And I forgot to actually look in the bylaw to see when this was put in. I'll just take a look right now and see if I can figure it out. Does anyone remember? This
Yeah. My recollection is that this the detail on this got added in. I remember a discussion. I think, too bad Tony wasn't here either. I do remember the discussion about you know, outdoor sales and wanting to provide some flexibility for people to do something different, and that's where this came from.
So like a lot of the things in here, you know, are things that I think that they would be, you know, reasonable limitations and conditions that you could impose as part of a minor site plan review. I mean, they're pretty standard things that you guys talk about and think about, many of them. B, I'm not so sure. I think that it's hard to, I just don't like things like this that are 10%. It's, you know, not every site is the same. Not every site has the same amount of businesses using it, the same level of interest, you know, that's just tricky. I feel like I think it would be more important to say that, like, you know, parking and circulation and pedestrian movement throughout the site still need to function, you know, versus like limiting the amount of area of a site that can be used for something like this.
I mean, if they, you know, I guess the question is like, if they want to use all their parking spots, can they?
I think that we would have to take that on a case-by-case basis in a lot of instances, like, and look what other businesses use this lot or are in this building. I mean, how many parking spaces technically by zoning and by whatever's provided on the property or allocated to that certain business. You know, is what's proposed at a certain time of day when the parking lot's virtually empty and then it comes down and then the parking lot gets full. I mean, I really think I think the goal should be to be as flexible as we can. And to take each, you know, case and look at it really like specifically to what's happening around it.
So
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think I mentioned this last time, but this came from the issue about red boxes popping up, right? And those are retail units being sold outdoor, right? For outdoor sales, right? That's what the term, right? Red box, right? Those,
Right.
They're not around anymore. But for a while they were popping up everywhere, and we really had no way of allowing that to actually happen. But no desire to specifically not allow it to happen, but here are the conditions they need to happen. And then when we discussed that, it was like, well, this could be used for not just red box or those sorts of things. It could be used for someone who is trying to do other, you know, sort of other sales. But the reason why it was kept at 10% was the idea was, yeah, if this was really accessory, you know, this is not, you can't take over the whole front of the business and have, have a ton of outdoor sales. The idea was this is a little side thing that if you want to have that type of a vending, soda machine, right? Essentially you should, right. This would allow for people to have an outdoor soda machine or whatever do they still have soda machines? Not a soda out of a machine in forever. But so that's where this came from, and from that context, it sort of makes sense. I don't know, right? I'm not sure anyone ever used it.
I feel like everything in here, and Julie, I do agree with what you said about, being prescriptive about the 10% may be too limiting to creativity or flexibility, as long as we're including criteria about pedestrian movement and around parking. But everything in here seems to me like it would apply to the commerce part of our definition of, what are we calling it now, of outdoor stuff, outdoor commerce. All of this seems to be really, and by our definition of open storage related to retail, that seems to be this type of open storage, and all of these criteria would still fit.
I wonder if there's a way to, like if we could include storage in this definition, and then just have these criteria for approval be moved up under, up here, like you guys were talking about earlier, considerations when you're reviewing this kind of proposal.
Yeah. And things stored on site overnight would be one of those considerations.
Right. Yeah, we could, make these considerations, whatever would be reflective of where we are right now. And then kind of just do away with the special permit process for this kind of thing altogether. I mean, if that's really, if really the reason or the impetus behind this section of the bylaw was because of red box and vending machines, and there's not something else that we're not thinking of that could benefit from having a special permit, I think the site plan review process is just as good. From what I've seen from you guys, you apply very similar logical thought processes to whatever it is you're reviewing. So I'm not sure.
Okay, I have a question, and it's a newbie question, but I'm just thinking about the mechanism of using minor site plan review versus special permit. Is there anywhere that you can think of where someone might want to, that's not subject to site plan review in the first place? No, never mind. I think I'm just answering my own question. Is there any situation where a special permit would be needed because a minor site plan review really isn't an option? Or does minor site plan review just as equally as special permit?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good question, Heather. And I would say we just have a trigger right here. Outdoor storage, commerce, dining, or
Yep, there we go. Okay.
requires a minor site plan review.
So I have another question. If you scroll down, right, and if we do this like with the table. So if you have, you know, if you want outdoor commerce, dining, or recreation, and you're going through a site plan approval process, is that an approved use? The way that you have, I mean, even right now, right? I mean, or if you have it this way, I'm just, are we creating another step if someone tries to, you know, redevelop a site and they want, you know, to the ability to do, you know, outdoor, you know, exercise classes, then they need to go through, can we wrap that into the site plan review, or would they then also need to do a minor site plan review in addition to their site plan review, which would be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we would try to be smart about it and wrap it into the full site plan review.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
but as a use, would they be able to do that? Because we say that they need a minor site plan review as for approval of the use.
Sorry, was that a second question? I missed the beginning part.
Just because if in the table of uses, we say that it's approved with a minor site plan review, then don't they need to have a minor site plan review to approve that use, even if they're having a site plan review?
Well, so it's accessory. I mean, that's a good question, John.
I just, you know, I don't want us to get caught up in like some insane circle.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and one that would maybe come up at town meeting. So good to think about it in advance. You know, I would say we could say somewhere that when in combination with a full site plan review, the full site plan review governs, just like we do when it's a combined site plan special permit with the CPDC. You know, we could just say that,
yeah,
and then that covers us.
All right.
But I think it's just important that like no less than a minor site plan review will happen. And then in an instance where it's like an add-on to an existing business and building, it's no more than a minor site plan review, right?
Right.
So that's a good point. I'll make a note to add that somewhere.
So I think we're circling around the idea that that open storage as defined originally, we could likely do, we could recommend that it get eliminated, but use these same criteria minus B, open storage for no more than 10% of the lots total, as part of the considerations in the stated considerations in the minor site plan review. But this is only for open storage, or otherwise known as outdoor commercial or
Yeah, I would say we would probably want to make the definition just say outdoor storage, so that we have that covered. If someone's like, well, I don't want to have dining or commerce, but I want to just have all this stuff outside, you know, maybe we just lump it in there and just say outdoor storage, commerce, dining, programming, you know, and then we can have these criteria to kind of set some parameters, or at least some considerations right up front. Does that sound good? Cool.
So Julie, I know we sort of jumped around here. Are there other, do you want to go back up? I know Tony had some comments or questions.
Yeah, so we addressed one of Tony's questions, which was whether to keep open storage separate or not. And then let's see. Oh, I guess I would just ask really quick before we go all the way up, and John, you might be the best person to remember or answer this. So we have two different waivers here. So the first one is the waiver for loading zone requirements. And that looks like it can apply to any application in any zone. And then we have waiver of parking, loading space, and related design requirements in the business districts. And I didn't know if we wanted to just maybe put them together and just say business industrial overlay, and then like a waiver, it's like a request that's made from an applicant to you guys, and you vet it and talk about it and decide if it seems appropriate. So I don't know that we necessarily need to say it can only happen in a certain district. You might say it can happen in a business district on this lot, but not in the business district on this lot, and have very good reasons for it. Do you know what I mean? Because there are reasons that they're separate that you remember.
No, I don't recall.
Okay. All right, I think I'll work on some language kind of combining them and see where we go from there. Okay. And then let's just expand this one again. So that Tony's two other comments, we talked about like having some considerations. So I'll work on that. And then those considerations can include like a time frame and temporary, like we talked about earlier. I think that is really, oh, so then then the other piece was, you know, do we want to say what we mean by minor? Like set some limits on what that can mean before someone even applies. That's right. The second one here, where my cursor is.
Do we not have a definition of minor elsewhere?
We have the triggers right here. But I think he's saying like within this letter D, like, so would we still consider it minor if, for example, like Fuddruckers wanted to like have the entire Jordan's parking lot as outdoor dining? Would we consider that a minor site plan review?
Well, only if it's related to outdoor dining, right? That's only, right, that would be just one aspect of the site plan review, of the site plan, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should set limits on what could be minor before someone applies. I think it's like they should come in with what they think is appropriate and what their landlord will sign off on for their property. And then you can take it from there. And that we would let them know that you're going to consider site circulation, whether there's sufficient parking still, you know, safety, like routes that need to be incorporated or included, all the stuff. And so it might get scaled, it might become smaller.
Yeah, I find myself reminding myself that this is all under accessory uses. So it's still all these, it's outdoor commerce, dining and recreation that's related to the primary use in the first place.
Right.
And that to me still fits with minor.
That creates some limits in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that if we were to set some parameters, they might seem arbitrary and we might regret it.
Well, the other thing, the problem that we always have is, you know, minor for, you know, for one site that's all of, you know, 4,000 square foot isn't the same as minor for Home Depot, the Home Depot site or the Jordan site, right? Those are two different things.
Totally.
So that's very difficult.
Yeah, okay. That kind of gets at like that whole 10% of the lot.
Right.
Like, you know, it doesn't really work in a one size fits all kind of way. Okay.
And then I'm sorry, I don't know where we left it with the idea of having someone come back, right? I guess I'm not for necessarily including that as a requirement of the whole, right? If that's a condition that we end up with on any one particular application, that's fine. But I think as a, you know, for business owners to come and say, well, you know, this board is going to approve it and then make investments or whatever. And then next year they may, you know, decide, no, for whatever reason that can't work. So either they approve it, you know, either they meet the standards that we have or they don't. And if they don't, then it'll become a problem that we can put conditions on. That's the way
I mean, we can, in the permit, in the decision, you know, we can say that if they failure to comply with this permit will result in them needing to come back. We can reiterate this criteria C right here that is, you know, this is a trigger for minor site plan review. So if they don't comply with their permit, you know, I mean, we can build that stuff in.
Yeah.
And if there's a site that really becomes a problem, you know, I'd rather bring them back and try to problem solve with them or have them decide that whatever it is they're doing just isn't working for them, versus like having every single applicant come in a year later and, like you said, have to live with that uncertainty of whether they're still going to be able to do something they may have invested some decent dollars into. So I am inclined to agree with you, John, on that one.
So that's everything, right?
Yeah, and then going back to what Pam had said at the beginning, we would include like your comment about, you know, understanding all the different physical pieces that are included in whatever the proposal is, could be something that would be listed under considerations. Right. Or somewhere in here. I'll think about, I'll give that some more thought.
And so what I hear you saying, Julie, is where you have highlighted right now, the guidelines and considerations that you're going to come back with a different suggestion that elaborates on that a little bit more, pulls the stuff up from outdoor storage, as well as, right, we have to have something specific to outdoor dining, right? Because the outdoor storage, a lot of the same, it's a lot of the same things, but there's some specifics for outdoor dining that probably need to be included in there.
Right. Yep. Try to think of some language to kind of give applicants some idea of like what your goals are and what you'll be considering when you review their proposal. Yeah. All right, that's great.
With
member of the public here.
Yeah, with that, Patricia, are you still with us? You're on mute.
Patricia, you're muted. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Hi. So I just have a couple questions. Like when a bylaw is changed, who has to approve a bylaw being changed? How does, I know you're discussing what you would like to have the bylaw changed to or amended or whatever the correct word is, but who is the party of people that approves or denies that? Is there a process that goes through to get it changed?
There is a process. So CPDC, right? We make a recommendation for something to go on the town meeting warrant, and then essentially this our proposed zoning change goes to town meeting for approval. Before it gets to town meeting, we do have a public meeting, a CPDC public meeting that's to go over sort of the final version, right? Obviously, what you've heard tonight is really a working session on us trying to figure out what we're going to propose. But once we get all of that, we will have a proposed zoning bylaw change that then the public can comment on, review and comment on. After that point, it goes to town meeting.
Okay, and so after that, then what happens? After the public has a right to comment on it, then what's the next step?
It goes to it goes to town meeting.
Okay, and is that like how often is town meeting? Is that?
Town meeting is twice a year.
Okay.
It's made up of, help me out there, Julie, how many people?
I believe 192.
192 elected members.
Okay.
The way we do it in Reading is, right, it's not open town meeting, it's representative town meeting,
Yeah.
I think it's called, right? So you elect your town meeting members,
Mm-hmm.
and then they vote on all sorts of issues, and some of them include zoning amendments. Okay,
because I don't know, like, wouldn't they be sitting in on this part of the meeting? I mean, it just seems like for me as a resident lay person not working for town hall, I think like just having gone through the experience of what I went through as a resident and not really feeling like it was the most democratic type of process. Now that I've sat in on this session, I feel even more so that way. I feel like what I'm hearing you discuss is that the verbiage you would like to include to have it proposed, but it's really allowing you or whoever's making the decision about somebody getting approval for what you're talking about. It's the easiest, most broad language that allows you to control what happens or doesn't happen. And I don't think that's necessarily, from where I'm sitting, a good thing. So I would hope that people like me would be privy to the knowledge of what goes into a meeting like this, because what goes before people in the end is basically what you've decided and how you've decided to word it. and then they don't really know the whole thought process or what contributed to that verbiage. So, I mean, is there any point that if they didn't sit on this meeting right here, that they have access to know what was discussed?
Absolutely. So this meeting is recorded, right? It's broadcast on RCTV.
Yeah.
So there, I'm sure there are people that watch this live, like, unfortunately, I'll admit that I do sometimes different public meetings. It's also, RCTV also puts it on their website so that people can watch what was said afterwards at any time. They can, on YouTube. And then we also have all the public meeting, all the meeting minutes as well that anyone can request. So they can go and, ask at town hall for the public meeting.
Yeah, my experience is the meeting minutes don't always reflect everything that's been discussed. So
correct. It's hard to capture everything. So, but
it's hard to capture. You capture what you want to capture, but you
Sure.
don't necessarily capture what other people would like to have had captured. So,
sure.
So does the body of the 192 people, do they typically make themselves knowledgeable about what they're like, how this will impact,
I'm going to say, like any other elected board, I think that bodies, that there are some people that make themselves knowledgeable and other people that do not. So I do know, I've been on this board for, over a dozen years. And there are some town meeting members that get in touch with me and ask me questions on different proposals or different zoning amendments. And some that I know that just go straight into town meeting without sort of gathering any background.
So is there a way to like, can a resident contact that body of people like all in one shot? Are they part of a like committee or something, or are they all contactable like individually? Do you know what I'm saying? If I wanted to like address this issue with that body, how would I do that?
So I don't know about beforehand, and maybe Julie, you can chime in on that. I mean, you certainly can, when this, presuming that this zoning amendment does go to town meeting, that you can request to speak at town meeting, whether you're on town meeting or not.
Does the vote happen right at town meeting?
Yes, it does.
Well, that's not really giving you too much time. I mean, so is there a way to contact them before town meeting? Just so they can consider what you have to say in their vote?
So, the town meeting members are elected, and it looks like you're in precinct 3. Do you know who your precinct 3 town meeting members are, Patricia?
No, I do not.
There's a list on the town website, so you can look at it and see if you know any of them.
Well, I know I can find that out, but that's not my question. So is there not a way to contact the whole body at one time? Mine is one representative with one vote. I mean, I'm talking about just conveying what you have the advantage of conveying what you would like to convey to them. Does the public have the same advantage?
I don't know if they are contactable as a whole body, and I don't know what extent individual members make themselves available to their constituents.
Well, it would seem like if they were voting on something, they would want to represent the people in their precincts and districts.
Can we back up? Because I think that we've actually described significantly multiple opportunities for input all along the way. So you being here in the first place, putting out your opinion, is a pretty significant contribution to that. So that's like, so we have a discussion, you join, you put your 2 cents in, part of our discussion, we consider that, you ask questions, that's input number
Yeah,
two.
after you put your 2 cents in, correct.
But if there's, I guess, if there is anything that you heard today that you don't like the way that what we had proposed,
Yeah,
I'd love to hear that from you.
right now, or?
Yeah, right now, or yeah,
Well,
later.
okay, I just would say that
Later, if you want to send an email, that's
I
fine
don't
too.
mind, I don't mind. Thank you for the opportunity to say it. I just feel like as a resident that is abutting a property that will now basically not need a minor modification or a major modification. They can just go to you, and if you decide that, and it sounds very much like it's, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be geared toward the property or the private property owner or whatever. I don't know the correct terminology, but it should also, it does, your decisions impact those who abut those properties, who basically don't have a say, because whatever you decide is what's going to happen at that point,
So can I
Well,
introduce Pam?
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, Pam, good. So what we try and do is we try and set rules that are equal across the entire town, right? And try and foresee as many conditions as possible. And what the balance that we have is to try and we try and balance the rights of each property owner to do what they can and want to do with their property without creating too many impacts on abutting neighbors, on safety, there's a whole, there's some buzzwords I know from noxiousness and that give us the right to include zoning to begin with, but we're trying to set these rules that apply equally, and then when a development, when someone wants to change a use or property or a structure on their property, then we apply those rules. And so what the public has in terms of an input is to help set those rules, right? To help set those rules that apply to every property in town. And so that when it comes down to a particular development, no one plays favorites, everyone plays with the same set of rules that have been decided beforehand.
Well, I'm sorry, I would have to disagree with that, because I feel like from my own experience, which I'm not going to get into, the whole history right now, but it's like several of the things that were done not in accordance with the permit or whatever, they've not been corrected to this point, and it's literally years later. So I would have to disagree that it's an equal and everyone is treated equally. That's not been my experience. And as far as Rachel introducing Pam, I'm sorry, I am not familiar with who you are, so maybe
I'm sorry. I cut off
maybe
Pam.
I should
That's
be.
okay.
No, I cut off Pam, but maybe Pam,
Okay.
you can tell your story.
Right. I am an abutter of a property that went up in our area. We're in zoning B. And I represented the abutters from that group. And we met with the developers and so on. We were extremely active. We were probably different from many of the other projects, but we've remained very active to make sure that everything that was in their site plan, that was in their development, that was built. I mean, we didn't go to the point of measuring, but we can tell how tall the building is. And we really kept on it. And you talk about your ability to have some input. We had some serious input to that project and continue to do so. So that's the reason why I'm on the board, actually, because people said, hey, you have an interest in how things work. You've been a project manager. Why don't you go ahead and join the board? And I did.
Good for you.
Well, and you know, that's an opportunity for anybody to represent their area or to present their views about what's right and what's wrong. So we're trying to, in this particular opportunity for doing this long range planning, we've got an option to say, what do we think would be appropriate going forward? We need to set some sort of guidelines. And if we don't do that now, we're going to have to look at everything on an individual basis. So that's the reason why I think Rachel said, you ought to talk to Pam. It's because I have experience with how this works. And this is why you have good guidelines. And if your representative isn't looking at these guidelines, then you need to remind them that that's what they should be doing. Because we're changing the bylaws because we need to. Because we've got a COVID pandemic, and we have to think about, people need to stay afloat. How can we make that happen?
Well, I understand that, but that would be a temporary thing, which this isn't.
Then one of the things I was going to suggest is that we have something relative to duration as one of the requirements. When they present, they need to say how long. We need to say, how long do you need this for? And they say, just for 3 months. And then we'll come back to you if we need to renew. But I think we need something relative to a duration so that it's not just hanging out there. We don't know how long the pandemic's going to last, but we can say, all right, you're not going to necessarily have your restaurant going year round, not in the middle of a snowstorm, but that's a possibility. But then maybe they should set a duration.
Well, yeah, and it kind of gives them a free reign of what they use their parking for, what they use their, you know.
But that's where we draw the line. We're not necessarily saying, if you're a restaurant, you can go ahead and build a rock climbing wall. That's not what we're saying. But if you're a gymnasium and you want to use your outdoor space for a rock climbing wall, then that's something that we need to look at.
Mm-hmm.
That falls into that activity. But we're just kind of giving some guidelines so that there's plenty of operating room. But I think, you know, I think if you have an interest in a particular case that you want to keep an eye on, then as an abutter or a neighbor to that property, that's when you show up to the open hearing to be able to put your 2 cents in. And you're absolutely entitled to do that. Anybody can. And they do. They show up in droves to some of these meetings.
Yeah, I showed up to plenty of meetings.
I think I've remembered. But you need to continue to do that as a resident of this town. Please. That's why you're here, and that's why we welcome you.
Okay. And can I just throw out one other thing that I would ask you to consider when you are, there's some verbiage in whatever Julie posted about like it's probably not the right verbiage, but shielding whatever was being stored
Right.
from the view of abutters. And it's like they may be asked. I would ask you to consider, you know, that your abutters don't, the abutters of a property do not have to look out and see, you know, whatever is being stored there. Because that, again, is like at your discretion. And,
Right.
you know, my experience has been that hasn't worked out for me in the past. So,
Okay.
Well,
I mean,
I do appreciate that, right? And I was thinking about that as I was reading through these two, and I'll give you the two examples why well, that I thought of and how they might be different. So one is, right, as I mentioned before, this all came out of Redbox, right? You know what I'm talking about, those.
well, I heard you, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's that, right. The vending machines that would give out movie DVDs, right? And right, there was one, I know there was one that was installed at the Cumberland Farms that's over by REI, right? And it was out in front of the Cumberland Farms there. And it was on the side of it was in view of the resident, right? But I guess to me, that's, you know, it's I'm not so sure I would be all that concerned about shielding that, you know, it was a red box, you know, that was on their little sidewalk there. So, so that's why you have this may versus a shall, because there's in some situations where maybe you really don't need to shield that from there. Now, I know that you can think of a gazillion cases where, you know, where you need that shielding, but there are also those cases where you know, shielding doesn't necessarily make 100% sense. The one that I think is really right, it's right in your neighborhood. What was the name of the Camp to Castle?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right. So they had outdoor storage.
Mhm.
Right. They had outdoor storage all the time. And I think that you could probably see that from your front yard or from.
No, I couldn't see that.
But, you know, that was definitely within, you know, it was across the street, and maybe your neighbor could see it when they, you know, look down the street. So the question there is, should they, if they were required to shield that, then they wouldn't have been able to put all of that out there, because there is some resident that could see it. So, you know, that's why we try and keep things sort of loose, because was that doing any harm, having those, you know, their
Furniture.
all the stuff, yeah, all the furniture out front. I didn't find offense to that, and I'm not sure I heard anyone that did. And so that's why we try and keep things looser, because if we make it as, you know, really tight, then they wouldn't have been able to do that. Versus,
Well, I don't think there's anyone, sorry, with all due respect, that could see that furniture from a residence on Hopkins Street. So I don't know, because it's in the front, so it's diagonal from one side, and it's on the side of the other side of Hopkins Street. So I don't know that there would be any opposition.
You get what I'm saying.
No,
though.
I get what you're saying.
There's a situation there that even if like someone could just a little bit see that from a resident, then you know, they wouldn't have been allowed to do that.
Right, but my point though is that if you, like you just said, you wouldn't have seen it as a problem, and so you are entitled to your opinion, right? But maybe if somebody else who could see it, you know, maybe they would have opposed it if they were in view of it. So they should have the right to do that, to
Right, and-
disagree or to oppose the board. And the way that it is right now, the way you're stipulating it, or what I heard from this meeting is basically you decide what happens and you leave plenty of leeway to make those decisions, you know?
So, no, I understand. I appreciate what you're saying. In that situation, right, as Pam had mentioned, we would hope that you know, if they had a problem with that, they would come and they would say that, yeah, that's not going to work for me to have all this furniture out front. And, you know, and this board listens, you know, and would address that. And so, you know, but if there were no one, if this board didn't see an issue and there was no one that came forward that saw, you know, presented us with an issue, then, you know, then no, that it would have gone, you know, the forward, you know, as proposed without having to shield. And so that's why I'm telling you all this is because I'm trying to give you an example of it's not always cut and dry, and which is why we try and, you know, sort of keep things loose. To some discretion, there's some things that that absolutely don't kept loose, and there's some things that that do, because each site is different and each proposal is different, and you know, we try and make sure that it works for everyone. But I do, you know, as Pam said, we do encourage you participate in every meeting, every you know, contact your town meeting members and give your input to them. And if you feel strongly enough and want to, you can present something at town meeting.
So is there a list of the 192 people somewhere?
Yes, the list is online. I can put I just, in addresses are on there, so you can write letters to them. They don't, email addresses aren't all, I don't know that there's an easy way to email everyone, but you can easily send letters to folks.
Yeah, I mean, Patricia, like when I started getting involved in town politics, it was around the kindergarten work a few years ago, and I wrote a personal letter to everyone in precinct 3 and delivered them personally. So,
yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, where would I get that list?
Heather's going to grab it
in the chat right here.
Okay, thank you.
There, that's it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just take a picture of that. One sec.
And you can just Google it. If you Google Reading Mass Town Meeting, you'll find it. That's all.
Okay, it just disappeared. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. I appreciate your
right.
time.
No problem.
Okay.
Hi, Tony.
Oh, I've been following along on RCTV,
All right.
skipping ahead, trying to catch up, and I finally caught up.
All right.
I just want to say something out loud really quick. Sorry to interrupt, but Andrew has offered to email you that link, Patricia, if that's easier for you.
No, I just got it. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it.
I think, Tony, that we are at the end of this discussion for the night on the potential zoning amendment, right? You saw that we discussed your comments. Any burning comment or issue that you want to get out there before we move on to meeting minutes or anything?
No, the only, I think, large issue before us is the temporary versus permanent nature of these types. And while I may say temporary, I think I prefer time of use, hours of use, and length of the event.
Yep.
And I know there's the issue of whether or not they should have to come back every year, or the only concern I have is it's always easier to deny at the beginning and grant later than take something back.
Mhm.
So if you say, yes, you can do it for the next 5 years, and then there turns out to be a problem, it's harder to say no when they go, well, you know, I planned on it taking forever, you know, being a 5-year, and therefore I planned my expenses based on a 5-year time frame. That's all.
Yep, understood. So I think, right, Julie, you're gonna come back with some ideas on those criteria, including the temporary nature and time frame and that sort of thing. So
Yes.
great. Do we need to take action, or can we just move on to the next item?
I think we can move on. I'll bring something back to you. The November 2nd agenda is pretty full, but well, I mean, I think I can try to turn something around pretty quickly so that it'll be available for you to at least review, and maybe if there's time, we can have a brief discussion in a second. And then we might consider trying to add another meeting in November, because I was just looking actually at the town meeting calendar for 2021. And the warrant closes in early March. So, you know, typically we have the public hearing in January, and in case it needs to be continued. You know, so I would probably look to schedule the public hearing the first meeting of January, which might mean like you need another meeting in November or December to kind of try to finalize the language a little bit more. I'll do some thinking on this schedule to try to figure it out. Yeah.
And Erin, thanks for joining. I don't hold it against you if you want to bail out as we go look at meeting minutes. So
thanks for having me, and thank
All right.
you all for your work on this. I know that it makes a big difference for the business community, and the discussion's been incredibly thoughtful. Thank you all.
Thanks. So, right, on to meeting minutes.
Andrew, how many sets do we have?
Just two, the 9:14 and the 10:05 minutes.
And were the 9:14 ones we started reviewing last time and
Yep.
made some edits?
Some changes to the end of the minutes.
Are you able to bring those up, Andrew, or?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Start at the top.
I will say I had just one comment on these, and I'm going to have us jump around a little bit.
Yep.
It was the second to last sentence on the item for the animal clinic.
Okay.
I think, yeah. Mr. Durazo asked if the driveway can be moved without an easement. Mr. Latham stated yes, and a recent subdivision has been approved crossing the same strip of land. I think when I read that, I think that maybe we just add in a different location.
Okay.
The same strip of land in a different location.
Gotcha. Makes
Right,
sense.
because it was down the street where that happened. The way that I read this, it was
that same site.
Yeah, it was
Gotcha.
right there. So.
Makes sense.
I just want to add something about this. It's a little tricky to like rewrite history, but we've been reviewing that strip of land in more detail, and the statement by Mr. Latham does not appear to actually be true. So we might want to say something like may have, or something like that, just so that someone doesn't read this in the future and think that that happened. I don't know.
It's an interesting challenge.
It's Veterans Way and it did not cross the strip of land. So. And I don't know.
May I just suggest you add a statement updated as of 10/19. Further research has shown that Mr. Latham's statements are incorrect.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, however you guys want to handle that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a right way to do that.
I would put that in parentheses to show
Yeah.
that that wasn't
Okay.
part of that meeting, but
Yeah.
it was part of our approval that we're taking today.
It actually should be in those, I don't know what you call them, the square parentheses,
Yeah.
Brackets.
brackets,
Brackets.
brackets.
I love brackets.
So what do you call the ones that are a little bit curly?
Ellipses. No, ellipses are
No,
the
they're
top.
the dots.
Dot, dot, dot. Curly brackets.
Fancy brackets.
Yeah, I call them italic brackets.
Braces. That's the official name for them.
That's
right.
right. Yes.
Thank you.
Good to know.
Which one, for the fancy ones or the regular ones?
There's parens, brackets, and braces
The braces are the squiggly ones.
Brace.
that
Got
look like Bob Hope.
I know what you're saying.
Jump to where we had some comments at the last meeting in this paragraph.
Andrew, I'm good. I think the last paragraph or so kind of covers some of the additional conversation.
Great.
The summary sentence, that Pam summarized the three kind of things that we were looking for.
Mhm. Thank you.
And I think that was where, right, that's why we held off on this.
Yeah, it's kind of this area
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
On the bottom of page 3, Maureen's last name is not Hearld, it's Harold. So transpose the R and the A.
That's correct.
Let's go all the way down. It's like the last. There it is. Is there? Is that where it is?
I fixed it
Oh,
up
yeah.
here on the
Okay.
top. Did I miss another?
Bottom of page 3. I think that's the only place.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? I know we spent some time on this last meeting. don't want to cut us off, but is it okay to move to the next one?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
or you can take a motion now or after, whatever.
Yeah, we'll do both at the same time.
Pull up the other ones real quick.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yep.
Please. Second to last paragraph. That's a little awkward on the end of that sentence. Changes to the CPDC also asked applicants to apply for the special permit in instances just as this application. You may
Yeah,
want
I
to
was
just
trying to word what John kind of mentioned, that
Yeah.
they knew that some signs would become non-conforming and need a special permit after the fact.
Just
We
say
can
that
probably stop it there if that makes sense
That
after
doesn't make
changes.
That does not make sense. I would just say the CPDC knew at the time they changed the zoning that a number of signs would become non-conforming.
Right.
Good.
So I have I'm sorry, I'm ahead at the
Yep.
zoning conversations. I don't want to derail from before, but one of the things that I think we talked about with the minor site review is that we were interested in this because it didn't necessarily have to wait until after town meeting, that there was aspects of being able to use the processes on a sooner basis, because and now that I'm thinking about our prior conversation, it feels like that does have to wait until April. So did I miss something in the understanding?
Not exactly. It's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So I think that, you know, what we'll try to do is have some language and a process in place really soon, like in the next couple of months, right? And we will do outreach and let businesses know to start thinking about it if they're not already, and to get applications ready. Knowing that, you know, at town meeting, it could be voted and become effective. Now, it's a little bit tricky, like technically, zoning bylaw amendments are effective the date of first publication of the legal ad for the public hearing. So like if the public hearing is in January and the legal ad prints in December, technically that December date is the clawback date that someone could say the zoning's effective to. So typically, you know, we encourage applicants to wait until at least town meeting. And then there's actually a period of time after town meeting. The town clerk has, I think, 30 days to file all the forms with the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office then has 90 days to review them and let us know whether there are any concerns. And then they get incorporated into the main bylaw. You know, typically we encourage applicants to wait as long as they can, just to make sure that, you know, it's at their own risk for a period of time if they take action on anything. You know, we try to craft zoning in a way that isn't going to alarm the Attorney General's office, and I think we've done a pretty successful job on that in the past. I'll knock on wood right now. And you know, so I think that we would try to figure a way to help businesses kind of prepare to be ready to pull the trigger when the vote happens at town meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And Rachel, part of the thinking on that was that, you know, we're in, you know, middle of October now. the opportunity to do much outside is sort of gone by the wayside until April anyhow. And so the expectation, there's little expectation that we'd see much desire to do anything between now and April.
Right. Okay. I like it. Thank you.
The second line down, Miss Adrian stated the proposed sign is more visible than the existing one. Insert one. Thank you. Yes. Yep.
And then Andrew, just toward the bottom of page 2, there's a small typo. Third paragraph at the bottom, Mr. Wesson asked if any PRD developments. The developments should not have an apostrophe.
Thank you. I saw that too.
Touch.
I don't want to rewrite what I said, so well, I'll just say it. The sentence that says Mr. Wesson stated a larger hurdle of town meeting passing such a plan is unlikely. I'm not so sure that I said it was unlikely, just that it was a big hurdle.
Okay. Larger.
So that would be change that to for town meeting.
Right.
Yep. And a period at the end. Grazie.
Because we all know better not to guess what town meeting's gonna do.
Touch.
I feel like that sentence seems incomplete. Mr.
Yeah.
stated that town meeting approval is another hurdle. Something like that.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
First bullet point on this page should be a capital T. Thank you.
at the end of the last paragraph, no, now I listen.
Sorry.
This starts, Mr. Weston stated, that
Yep.
paragraph. At the end, can we write the end of the paragraph for approval?
So that should be what, capital S on state?
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think that the paragraph, Andrew, I think it's the fourth paragraph down.
Hmm.
I think that this is confusing because I was talking about two different paths here. I think unless someone else can tell me what I was meaning here,
What
but
you were thinking.
yeah, I was saying that the way it's currently written, a special permit is required for the use.
Right. Mhm.
That was the open storage.
Yeah. Mhm.
I wasn't ever contemplating that it was going to be both, which is kind of what this paragraph makes it seem like.
When I read that paragraph just now, I have to admit I was confused, but it was highly probable that I was confused while we were talking too. So what about just saying she added that currently, yeah, just like a special permit is required for the use, which is discretionary and requires a lengthier process for applications.
Right. Yeah, I think that's better. And yeah, this is the thing. Someone mentioned this, that I said this earlier, and I was like,
Yeah. That's what I was about to say.
This doesn't seem right.
Which is why I was confused.
So it is, town meeting is in late April. So we are really going to need to like help businesses be really ready to pull that trigger.
Yep.
Yeah. What did I mean? This might be.
I think maybe clarify that second to last paragraph. Something about due to concern that businesses would take over the sidewalks or something like that. Yeah, I think that's good. Would encroach, yeah.
This one doesn't sound right, this sentence here.
Yeah, I may have said that. I don't think that's what I was saying, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I think what I was noticing is that principal uses are allowed, accessory uses allow the same use as the principal use.
Right,
I think that's what I read.
that's what I think you're getting at.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that what you meant, Heather, or were you saying kind of the opposite, that any principal use is also allowed as an accessory use?
That's what I was pointing out. I think that's what I read, right?
Okay. So say that principal uses are allowed.
Or if you could even say if it's consistent with the principal use.
That's just a little bit awkward.
Yeah, it's still awkward.
And then my response that doesn't directly relate to what she's saying is also awkward. That's okay.
All right. Any other comments?
No, I think you need to insert is before the word consistent in that last paragraph we just worked on. Yep, if it is.
So just say an accessory use is allowed by right.
Trying to think of the way the bylaw words.
So I can read it to you.
Yeah, sure.
Any use permitted by right as a principal use in a district shall also be permitted by right as an accessory use.
And I'm pretty sure I was probably just reading that.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to say it, which I don't normally say about this bylaw.
Right.
So you would say Ms. Cliff stated that any accessory use is allowed by right if it's consistent with the principal use.
Consistent with the by right principal use, right?
Yeah, I think it really should be stated the way it's in the bylaw.
Okay, you want to repeat that one more
Correct
time?
statement. Yeah. So Ms. Cliff stated that any use permitted by right as a principal use in a district shall also be permitted by right as an accessory use. Yeah.
And that's where you were pointing out, Julie, that open storage isn't listed in the principal use table. It's only in the accessory use table.
Right. And that makes sense. And just change principal to be AL instead of LE.
Yes.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Looking for two motions, right? What are the dates of these?
9/14 and 10/5.
Move that CPDC accept the meeting minutes of 9/14, as amended.
Second.
Can I do it this way? All those in favor, raise their hand. All right, that's opposed, none, and abstaining, none. That's okay to do it that way, right?
Sure.
All right.
And I think that
Does it have to be a voice acceptance?
I think it's okay because well, it's tricky to say what the recording can see on the screen. So you might as well do it by voice just in case.
All right, raise your hand and say aye. For
Aye.
those that voted aye. No? Abstaining? All right.
So is it 500 or did someone abstain?
Oh, sorry, I was distracted.
There's only 5 people here. Nick's not here.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Motion to accept the meeting minutes from 10:05 as amended.
Second.
Wait a second, Andrew, these should be in tonight's minutes.
That's what I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Should have made
Okay.
that clear.
All right, got it. Okay. See how efficient he is? The minutes are already done.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's 5.
Great.
And just change the
0-0.
date, Andrew, to say 10/5.
Oop, good catch.
Cool.
Is there anything, I know there's no other item on our agenda. Are there any updates, planning updates? Julie, Andrew? You don't have to have any if
I
you
just,
don't.
the days just like go by so fast. So
Right.
and I didn't think,
I don't think anything
have-
major tonight.
some of you may have seen that we're doing some outreach for a virtual educational session related to the stretch code, which will be on the town meeting warrant. So that's, the educational session is open to anyone, and it's on October 29th, which is a Thursday night at 7 p.m. Over Zoom. And so if you think you might attend, please let me know, because I'll post you guys if I know there's going to be a quorum of you there. That's, can't think of anything else that would be like new information for you guys. Oh, the open space and recreation survey is open too. And I sent you all an email this morning or earlier today, and at the bottom of my email, there's a link to the survey, so you can get to it that way. If you all want to give your 2 cents, I think it's open until November 13th, so you have a little bit of time, but
Great.
strike while the iron's hot.
All right.
So.
Thank you.
I can think of right now.
Any
Sounds
other
good.
items from anyone? Nope. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. 5-0. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.
Right.